Welcome on in, Eagles fans, to episode 61 of the No Huddle Show, our Philadelphia Eagles podcast right here on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined as always by Elliot Shore-Parks and Mark Eckel. They cover the Eagles for NJ Advanced Media. We're doing this podcast, a reactionary podcast, on the Friday morning after day one of NFL free agency. So naturally, Mark and Elliot were busy, and all of you out there were busy checking your phones and refreshing everything all day as the Eagles made a whole bunch of moves, from releasing Connor Barwin to signing Torrey Smith to signing Chance Warmack to the big one, signing Alshon Jeffery. We'll talk about all the moves and where they go next. Elliot, we'll start with you. Last week when you were at the Combine, the Eagles were there and Howie spoke. It felt like Howie was kind of setting the stage for maybe we're going to be a little bit more reserved than we usually are and maybe not as aggressive. And that all kind of went out the window on day one of free agency because they were one of the most active teams.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into the specifics of the moves and what's coming next, the two things I take from yesterday. One, Howie just literally always lies. And every time he talks, you should not take what he says seriously. Last year, he said they weren't going to draft a quarterback. They traded up to draft Carson Wentz. They said they weren't going to trade Sam Bradford. They traded Sam Bradford. Then at the Combine last week, as you mentioned, Joe, he's talking and he says, we gotta look for the long run. He talked about, how he's learned from the past mistakes of handing out big deals. And he didn't hand out a big deal yesterday, but, then he goes and does that. The other thing is everyone has been saying since the season ended, the Eagles don't have enough salary cap space to sign anybody. Well, they signed the top free agent on the market. So, it's fun to discuss the salary cap, and the Eagles are in a bit of a bind right now. But the salary cap in the NFL almost doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want. And, so Howie lying, I'm not saying that in a negative way. When he speaks to the media, he shouldn't tell his plan. As he likes to say, he doesn't like to give the answers away to the test. But it just it's funny how, we talk to Howie, we try to decipher what he says, and we break down the salary cap space. Yesterday kind of shows that that's almost a complete waste of time.
It does. And they went out and they were the most talked about team. I mean, the Browns trade.
They always are.
They always are. Right. There were a couple big things that happened on day one of free agency, but the Eagles and all they did, that was the biggest thing. Mark, before we get into the specifics of the three players, just your overall takeaway on the Eagles' aggression day one with these short-term deals, but obviously for some big names here.
Well, yeah, the biggest name's Alshon Jeffery, obviously. Torrey Smith was cut. I mean, I'm not excited. I mean, he wasn't even a quote-unquote free agent because he was a street guy. I mean, they could have signed him last week, whenever the Niners cut him, right? So I don't even consider that a big deal at all. I got to disagree with you guys about salary cap. I mean, yeah, there's ways you can get around it, but eventually it comes back together. It's like, it's like
it never seems like it does come back.
Yeah, it does. It's why Shady McCoy isn't on this team anymore. It's why Connor Barwin isn't on the team anymore. It's why a couple other guys in a couple of days aren't going to be on the team anymore, because it eventually it's like a credit card. Yeah, you can go buy all the new TVs and charge up all the stuff you want and pay that minimum payment all the time. But guess what? Eventually, you got to pay it. Eventually, it's going to come back on you.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the moves they made yesterday is, they're really all one-year deals. I mean, Jeffrey literally is a one-year deal. Torrey Smith is a 3-year deal, but before we, just to get it out to the listeners, it's really, of the $15 million, the 3 years, $15 million, only $500,000 of that is guaranteed.
Right.
So it's essentially an expensive tryout for the Eagles. So, I mean, he didn't really commit much to the long term, but what's interesting is he gave Alshon Jeffery a $14 million cap hit this year. I mean, when I had talked about the Eagles able to sign people, I was thinking they would backload the deal, kind of like Mark just, kind of alluded to.
But they didn't.
No, they committed $19 million, assuming Torrey Smith makes a team, which I think is a good shot. Not a guarantee, but I think it's a good shot. That's $19 million they committed this year, which is pretty crazy if you think about it.
Which means it's going to cost them – it already cost them Connor Barwin. It's probably going to cost them Jason Kelce, Michael Kendricks –
Ryan Matthews.
And who knows? Well, Ryan, I think he was gone anyway. But
he was, but I don't think Jason Kelce. I mean, we can get into that later on the specifics of the guys.
Somebody has to go.
So sure they do, because the Eagles are over the cap now. We'll get into that. Like, what's next after? Let's go through the three players that arrived, and they're going to speak after we're done recording this. You guys are going to talk to these guys as they arrive and become Philadelphia Eagles. But let's start with the big one. We can work our way backwards. We don't have to go in chronological order from what happened the day one of free agency. Let's start with Alshon Jeffery. That's the one that everyone is clearly the most excited about. This is a guy that a few years ago looked like he was going to be a perennial top 10 wide receiver, had an injury-plagued year, then had the suspension with the PEDs last year, 52 catches, 821 yards last year. Obviously, he's had bigger years in the past, 27 years old. Elliot, on him, how do you think this happened? Like, and not just the fact that he accepted this deal, but like this was a two-way street. One, the Eagles had to be willing to give a big cap number for 1 year, but if you asked me 2 weeks ago, would Alshon Jeffery accept a 1-year deal? I would have said no way. Not with all the money out there in free agency. Right. How do you think they pulled this off?
Well, all right. So we're recording this on a Friday, but Thursday night, Howie talked to the Eagles website, and he basically said, and again, I just said he lies, so we shouldn't listen to what he says. But this is what he said. He said basically this all came together in the past 24 hours, and he alluded to the fact that they had something else going on that they were going to do, and then this kind of came along and they did that. So if you take that at face value, it sounds as if reading into that in the tea leaves, I don't think Alshon Jeffery liked the offers that were out there for him. I think his average per year was probably a lot lower than he thought. And so he said to himself, I'll make $14 million this year. And then, I mean, I do think, part of the reason for him taking this is he is confident, at least a little bit, in Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. I mean, you don't make a 1-year deal if you don't think you're going to do well. So I think his train of thought on this was, I'll go into next season. I'll have a better quarterback than I had in Chicago, a better team overall than I had in Chicago. And I'll put up big numbers. And then next offseason, when the salary cap goes up another $10 million, and he'll really have the Eagles, right where he wants them. Because if he has a Pro Bowl year or anything close to it, there's no way they're letting him walk. So then he'll get a huge deal next offseason. That's his thought process. The Eagles' thought process is basically, yes, you mentioned it, Joe. Alshon Jeffery, at his peak, was maybe a top 10 receiver. But he's hurt all the time. He's missed 17 games in 5 years. He has the PED suspension, which means if he gets another one, he misses 10 games. So, and I'm not sure Alshon Jeffery is like elite at anything. So I think he's a very, very, very good player. But like, I'm not so sure. I mean, I was debating this yesterday with some people. Is he a top 20 receiver when you take into account the injuries and PEDs? Like, I'm not sure. So the Eagles get him for 1 year to kind of test it out. And then if he kind of lives up to his potential, they'll pay him next offseason. So I think that was probably the thought process behind the 1-year deal from both sides.
Mark, when you look at this and the Jeffrey deal, like when you look at his fit here and what he could be, do you still look at him as one of those top 10 to 15 to 20 wide receivers, or do you think he's fallen out of that now?
Well, I feel very strongly about PEDs. I think, to me, that's the worst thing a player does. I don't care about a lot of. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't care, but the guy smokes
because
weed.
It's cheating. Because it's
yes, it's giving a guy smokes weed. It doesn't make him a better player. It means
right.
He doesn't smoke weed. I mean, and that's not right. I'm not condoning the smoke, although it's legal in half the states now. But that doesn't bother me because it does. And even if a guy, and again, I'm not condoning guys getting in trouble. Nigel Bradham having a gun at the airport doesn't make him a better linebacker. It's a stupid thing he did and he got in trouble and whatever. They're all but when you take PEDs, why'd you take them? Did you take them because you need to take them to play better? Because if that's the case, maybe you're not that good if you don't take them. I mean, I always go back to baseball with the guys that hit all the home runs when they were, guys would hit 8 home runs. They took steroids and they hit 40 home runs. So, that bothers me more than anything. So I don't know how good he is. Was he always taking them and he just finally got caught? We don't know. That's all questions we will never have answers to. So if you go back to 2014, Alshon Jeffery was a heck of a receiver. I mean, one of the best. 15 he got hurt, 16 he got suspended. Right? He's the Eagles' best receiver. I'll say that. He's probably the Eagles' best receiver since Macklin, I guess.
Yeah, that seems like it makes that seems like a fair way to say it.
To me, when kind of like judging Alshon Jeffery, if you'd asked all three of us 2 weeks ago, or even 2 days ago, if the Eagles the Eagles' objective this offseason at receiver was to find a number one stud receiver that Carson Wentz can grow with. Would you agree that? I mean, they've basically said that. That was the goal, right? And I think by that criteria, Alshon Jeffery does not meet like that. It's a no with Alshon Jeffrey.
He wouldn't have been my top guy. He would not have been my top guy.
All right, so I made a big board of guys, and I included like the draft, free agency, trades, and I had him ninth. Wow. Like I had Mike Williams ahead of him. I had Brandon Cooks ahead of him. Like there were guys I had ahead of him. But I guess what I'm saying is on a 1-year deal, you can't really say this is the guy Wentz is going to grow with. Like maybe he'll grow with him, but
Elliot, you say, and I agree with you to some. I agree with everything you said about the 1-year deal on both sides. But there is a flip side. Like you said, he has a great year, and the Eagles won't let him get away. Well, what if he has a great year but doesn't like it here for whatever reason?
Right.
He doesn't like Doug Peterson. He doesn't like Frank Reich. We don't know. We don't know. You could have a good year somewhere and say, you know what? I had a good year. Now I'm going to New England for $20 million or whatever. I'm going to Pittsburgh. Wherever he wants to go, he can. That's the danger the Eagles take by only giving him a 1-year deal.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, let's say, we all think the Eagles will probably be around the same as they are next year. Maybe a little better, a little worse. But I don't think any of us thinks they're going to go 4-12 or 12-4. They'll be right around 7-9, 8-8, something like that, right? So
you think that? See, I think that. But
I'm closer to 12 wins than I am 4.
I think they won 7 last year. It all depends now what they do in the draft, right? Because they have a lot of defensive holes that
they better have a draft.
Yeah, yesterday didn't fill that. I don't think it's crazy to think they could win 9 or 10 games if they have a great draft, but I don't know if they're going to have a great draft yet. We have all we have to go on right now is what they did yesterday.
Well, what I'm saying though is, like, the flip side of look, if the Eagles have to pay him a ton of money next year, that does suck. Obviously, you never want to give a player a ton of money because it eats a ton of your salary cap space up. But on the flip side is, what if things don't go great next year and it's week 12 and Alshon's not getting the ball a ton? And I'm not trying to be like a pessimist, worst case scenario here, but the reality is Alshon Jeffery's not here to win games. Alshon Jeffery's here to make money. Right? Like, Alshon Jeffery did not come to Philadelphia to win a Super Bowl. That's what he'll say at his press conference. But that's not why he's here. He's here because he thinks this opportunity gives him the best chance to get a long-term deal. So his goal going into next season is that. So if it's week 12 and the Eagles are 6-6 or whatever, and the Alshon's not getting the ball, and blah blah blah. Like, what's his mood gonna be like? I'd imagine not great. So there's been a lot of comparison to, a lot of talk of Jordan Matthews. Say what you will about Jordan Matthews. He has more catches than Alshon Jeffery does in the past 3 years. And he's a complete team guy. Like, I heard this on the radio yesterday. I think this was a good point. Jordan Matthews said he was going to rent a cabin out in North Dakota for Wentz and the receivers to work out off this summer. Do you see Alshon? Is Alshon Jeffery going to go to that? Like, I don't know. And I'm not saying that matters a ton, but my point is the Eagles talked all before yesterday about building and building and building. Well, like, these aren't really building moves. These are closer to win now moves than building moves. And so that's why
I guess what was the alternative, though, right? When these guys started going off the board, like let's take Howie. I know what you said earlier, and I'm with you, Elliot, and most GMs lie, right? But let's take him at his word that this happened fast. So, like, as all this is happening, and it's fluid in free agency, and Deshaun gets a lot of money from the Bucs, and obviously they couldn't figure out a deal with Cooks and the New Orleans Saints, and Kenny Britt goes to Cleveland. Like, as this is all happening, would the alternative been better? I agree with you. This might not be a long-term thing, and this might not be something we look back in 5 years and say that was the moment. But, like, the alternative was what? Like, what would they do? As the other free agent receivers went off the board, they're going to sit on their hands and bring Aguilar back? And
they could do nothing. Well, I'll let go ahead.
Did Cooks go anywhere?
No, Cooks didn't go anywhere. Obviously, they didn't think they could land him because otherwise they wouldn't have done this, right?
I would have waited it out. You see, this is what Howie does, and that's good and bad. Howie's got to make that splash. He's got to do something on the first day. He's got to get his name in the paper. He's got to get the headlines. Wait. And I thought, Elliot, you and I talked about this. You kept saying Howie's going to wait New Orleans out. He's going to, because let's be honest, there's no way.
Which is what I thought.
Right. I thought, I thought it was a great point. I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. He's going to, because let's be honest, from what we're hearing, Cooks doesn't want to be in New Orleans. The players and him are, he's having a whatever you want to call it, a Twitter war with some of his teammates there. It's not a good situation for Cooks in New Orleans. I think if the Eagles waited, and now New England might get him, but they might not. We don't know what's going to happen with Malcolm. The rumor there. I would have waited. And guess what? A receiver that I like the best of the free agents is also still out there. Terrell Pryor.
Who's taking a visit, by the way, which is pretty interesting to me.
He's still visiting the Eagles?
That's like old school.
No, not the Eagles.
He's visiting the Redskins, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have waited. You don't have to act the first day.
Well, and the other thing is, all right, so not to bring up Sam Hinkie, but the thing that Sam Hinkie did during his 3 years when he was here, 2.5 or whatever it ended up being, is he didn't just like Mark said, Howie just made the move, because it came here and he did Alshon was like, oh, I'll take a 1-year deal, and it's like boom, right? Like Hinkie, you don't just have to use your resources to read them. You don't just have to use your resources to use them. Like if you're the Eagles and you truly, as you've said multiple times, have 3-4 years down the road, that's your number one priority, then I'm not so sure a 1-year deal is a deal you make. Like it just, you can't hate it because Alshon's a good player, and yes, they've upgraded at receiver, but it's weird. Like you're almost better off taking a chance on Terrell Pryor on a 3-year deal. And yes, Pryor's a risk because he only has 1 year of being a receiver under his belt, but it's just like when I think about
with bad quarterbacks.
Yeah, with bad quarterbacks. Well, yeah, Jeffrey's had bad quarterbacks. Although Jay Cutler a few years ago wasn't that bad. But
that was better than anybody Brown.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you're Howie, was this move made with the future in mind? Again, like, I don't think you can say that. I mean, the two guys, all right, if the two guys you want Carson Wentz, theoretically, right now, to develop the most chemistry with, outside of Zach Ertz, because he's a tight end, are Alshon Jeffery and Jordan Matthews right now. They're both not under contract in 2018. So I mean, like, if you're the Eagles, are you saying to Carson, like, these are the guys who are going to be here for a long time, develop with them, or are you saying what? What's your message to Carson? I think the interesting thing was how he said to the Eagles website. And this is the first time I've heard him say that. He said they made these moves to protect Carson Wentz. They didn't say to help him develop, to help him grow, to protect him.
They wanted to get him some weapon. I mean, that was.
But my point is, like, using the word protect to me sounds like these are not, like, he doesn't view these as long-term answers. Like you got this to protect him, not so much to help him, like, develop and grow. You know what I mean?
Man, I thought we were going to fight. I'm agreeing with everything you said.
But they could do both at the same time, right? You could protect him and help him grow by having this guy to throw the football to. Like, but both could be served there.
What if he leaves next offseason?
Right.
What if they didn't bring him in? They still would have to figure out this position next offseason.
Well, I guess that's kind of the point. It's like, are you better off having guys here next season that you know are here for the long run, and maybe they aren't as good as Alshon Jeffery, but you know they're here for the long run? Or are you better off bringing Jeffrey in, who, and I'm not labeling him as a person because I don't know him yet and all those things, but is coming in here with selfish motivations? I mean, can we all agree on that? And I'm not faulting him for that, but I mean,
sure he is. I mean, we see this all the time in sports. I mean, the 1 year deal, and you go out and you make more money either with that team or somewhere else. Do we? I'll ask you guys this, and then we'll get into the Torrey Smith thing and Warmack.
Can I make one more point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I think when you look at the possible, like, when you add the fact that he's here on the 1 year deal, which is weird, you add the fact that he's going to be here to make money and not try to win. You add the fact that I don't think any of us, these are just our opinions, thought Alshon Jeffery would have been our top receiver. And then there's just a lot of, like, I think, like, not smoke, but like the PD suspension, the injuries. Like, I just think that if you told me they would have signed the number one, if you told me 6 months ago they would have signed the number one wide receiver on the market, I would just think there'd be a lot more positivity around the move than there is with this. And I think that's why it's like, it's a little confusing. It's a head scratcher because you say you signed the number one wide receiver. In theory, we should all be saying, wow, they fixed the receiver position. They have their number one guy. You know, how he went out and spent, and yeah, it's a big deal, but he did it, blah, blah. But instead we're talking about maybe he leaves. So that's why it's hard to get, like, completely wrapped around this decision.
Do we make too much of this? And I mean fans, every time we keep talking long term, right? What is long term in the NFL? I keep thinking about this, especially with the Eagles and what they're doing this offseason. Like when the Brandon Cook stuff came up, a lot of people kept saying, well, he could leave after 2018 anyway, right? He's going to be a free agent soon anyway. Like, is there any such thing as really long-term? Like, even if you sign a free agent, you probably can get out of it in 2 years anyway. Do we make too much of that? And I don't even just mean Alshon, Elliott. I just mean in general. Do we make too much of long-term? Like, outside of quarterback, how many guys on the Eagles are you confident are going to be on this football team in 3 years? A couple?
I agree with that, but the difference is Alshon is literally only under contract for 1 year.
Right.
So I agree with your point that you're saying, like, look, I think the Eagles could win the division next year. So, I mean, like, to say that they're building and rebuilding is kind of a weird term because in the NFL, it's not like the NBA. So I agree with that. But the difference is, like, he's literally only under contract for a year. So you cannot say with certainty that he will be here in 2018. You just can't say it because he's not under contract. So that's why when we discuss, like, if they would have drafted Mike Williams at 14 or John Ross at 14 or Corey Davis, you would say maybe they're not going to work out. Maybe they're not term solutions, but at least you know they're here for 4 years and they're going to have the chance to work out here. And they could re-sign Alshon. I'm not saying that's not a possibility, but it's just, you don't know. And that's the weird part.
You don't. No, that is. And that gives some uncertainty. Even though there's excitement, there's uncertainty. It's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling. Go ahead, Mark.
This is one of the weird things, and I've been saying this for years about the NFL, how they do it backwards, and this could really affect the Eagles this year. The NBA does it right, and there aren't many things the NBA does better than the NFL, but the way they do the draft and free agency is the right way. They do the draft first, then you do free agency, because now the Eagles are handcuffed. If Mike Williams is there at 14, what are they going to do? They can't take him. Can they?
I don't know. That's a tough call. But again, all right. So, like, you look at the receiver. Is Torrey Smith a long-term solution?
Well, he's not even that good.
Okay. All right. Alshon.
You're paying him 14. I mean, like, I'm just saying they need a corner so.
I agree with you 100%. But I'm saying if we go by the criteria of the Eagles need a number one stud receiver for Carson Wentz to grow with, who fits that description more, Mike Williams or Alshon Jeffery?
Mike Williams.
All right. Well, I'm not saying I would take him. I'm saying
I'm saying
Eagles are in a tough spot now.
Right, but if they did the draft, if it was an NBA, the draft comes first. You see who's there for. Okay,
I think you're right, Mark. Yeah, it would make a lot more sense.
Isn't it better? Every team tells you, "Oh, we build through the draft. We draft, and then free agency we use as a." Then why not do that first? It just.
Well, I think I think the reason is because it guarantees that more players, like more veterans, get a job. Do you know what I mean?
You're not going to fill all your needs in a draft. Mike Williams isn't going to be there for some team. So
no, but also to talk specifically about the Eagles, like, I'm sure Howie did this thinking, like, he just came from the combine. He probably has a rough idea of where you don't know for sure, but what? Yeah. Sorry.
I agree. No, I agree. He probably thinks Williams isn't going to be there, right?
Right, exactly. So that's why he makes the move. But then again, you never know. Maybe the night before the draft, a video comes out of him smoking weed out of a mask.
And then he's there.
Right, exactly. So I don't know, but I agree they have to take a corner. And I'm not saying you draft for need. And it does fit nicely because the best player will probably also be a corner. But yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying that was totally off topic. But it's bothered me for years that they don't do the draft first.
No, your way would make a lot more sense. It would be more logical to do it that way. We have it this way, and the Eagles have Alshon Jeffery. All right, quickly, let's touch on the other two moves on day one of free agency, and then we could get into what's next, which is going to be, I'm sure Eagles fans are trying to figure out how they're going to get into the cap and really how they approach if they do anything else in free agency, and then of course the draft. But let's start with Warmack and Torrey Smith. Mark, you can go first on this. Thoughts on those
please
two?
Let Mark go first on Warmack. All
right. But my thought is on Warmack, he was such a good college player. I haven't watched Tennessee closely enough during his time there to know what went wrong. They didn't love him because they didn't pick up the option. The Stoutland thing is interesting to me because that's his coach from Alabama. But go ahead, Mark. Torrey Smith and then Warmack.
Smith first?
Yeah, Smith first.
Smith can run. I mean, I talked to 2 or 3 personnel guys about him early in the day, right when the Eagles signed him, and we thought that was going to be the big move today. They both said the same exact things almost, which is rare. I don't always get the guys to say exact. He can run. He can still run. Not a good route runner. He's basically a go. Have him go deep. He's not real precise. Average to below average hands. Great kid, I was told. Great guy to have in the locker room. No, he's not a troublemaker by any means. Like a lot of wide receivers, he's not that diva. But he can run. So I mean, if the Eagles just want a guy that can stretch the field, which they don't really have, so that is a plus for him. He'll do that. Now, I think he's going to disappoint some people when he is open and Carson throws it to him and it bounces off his hands or something. But at worst, he's going to be a deep threat, and any deep threat has to be. Defenses have to pay attention to you because you are, so he may cause a safety to play deeper, which will help you over the middle. It could open things up a little bit for Zach Ertz and Jordan Matthews, who I think are two very good receivers, by the way. I think both of those guys don't get nearly enough accolades, I guess.
Yeah, they get beat up by everybody. They're not bad players.
Not bad. They're actually good players.
Yeah.
They're not great players, but they're good players. I mean, a lot of teams would like to have either one of those guys. See, again, and then Chance Warmack real fast. Listen, nobody likes Alabama players more than I do. But if you look at Alabama offensive linemen, they're all great at Alabama. And none of them really turned out that well in the NFL. I mean, Barrett Robbins was tremendous. He was on, 2 or 3 national title teams, played center one year, left tackle another year, got the, the Outland Trophy for the best lineman, I think once or twice. He's not even in the league anymore. The Eagles brought him in because of Stoutland. He was cut by the Rams, cut by the Bears, cut by the Eagles. I mean, DJ Fluker, another first-round pick out of Alabama, just got cut by the Chargers. For some reason, I don't know if it's the Alabama system, which is just so good, or whatever they do there, but their linemen, they're always well-regarded, but they never pan out. And Warmack's another one. He's been terrible in the NFL.
The thing about, I'll start with Warmack is, I mean, I agree. Like, I like to think the Eagles aren't signing him to be a starter, but I also think that if you look, I mean, they allowed Alan Barber to test for a trade, which makes me think they're obviously not super high on him. And they probably also knew they were signing Warmack. Warmack comes here on a 1-year deal. Again, a guy that's trying to revive his career and, kind of like turn it into more. Kind of like Steven Wisniewski last year. And to just be frank, I think Wisniewski made his opinion pretty clear all year that he was there to get a new deal and to play, and he wasn't exactly team first, rah-rah. So Warmack's going to come in. He has Stoutland as his coach, who he was at Alabama. So that's probably, I would think Stoutland's a little partial to him. And it's good for Warmack. Maybe he can turn it around. But I think Warmack's going to end up starting. I mean, I would be interested to know how many guys sign on day one of free agency and don't end up starting. So I think there's a good chance he ends up being your starter. And if that's the case, that means either Isaac Seumalo, a guy they're really, really high on, for good or bad, they're really high on, is either going to be riding the bench or he's going to be starting at center. So I'm curious as to what the Warmack signing means for Jason Kelce, and then also the cap situation. But that was kind of the thing I read into more, that they've signed their starter at guard. Barring a catastrophe at training camp, Warmack is going to be their starter at guard. Agree. Right? So
Elliot, though, I don't mean to interrupt, but they're like you said, they're not crazy about Barber because they did give him a chance to shop his deal. Maybe I think in a perfect world, on a Super Bowl kind of team, if the New England Patriots, the Atlanta Falcons, the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Alan Barber is the perfect sixth man on your line. You don't want him because he can play 4 positions for you. He can back up at both guards and both tackles. That's a great guy to have on your team as in that role.
Right.
Maybe the Eagles say, maybe they do keep Kelce. I think they get rid of Kelce, but I think if Kelce stays and he's your center, you could put Brooks and Warmack at guards and make Barber that perfect sixth.
What about Seumalo?
He's your center.
He's your backup center.
He's your backup center, though.
Well, if Kelce's still here, he's got to be, yeah.
Okay, I agree, but you're the one that always says third-round pick, second.
I wrote today when I did the salary cap, I think Kelce's going to go. I don't think but you think Kelce's going to stay, right?
I think Kelce's going to stay. Actually, I said that stronger than I feel it. I think Kelce. I think Kelce is going to, like, gun to my. I don't know, because if there was a trade market for him, I feel like that would have happened already. Maybe they're banking on during the draft they move him, but then what do you do? Like, let's say during the draft you don't get a good offer. What do you? I mean,
you just cut him.
Well, that's, I mean, not to sound like a 4-year-old, but like, that's not very nice. Like, he's been with your team for how long? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
he's the kind of guy you want to do right by him.
Right, exactly.
You think
You're
they would
string him out to dry all offseason, then cut him at the last moment after the draft and after free agency?
No, I don't think it gets to that point. I think they trade him or cut him in the next couple of days.
All right, so let's get into that. What's next here, right? Because the Eagles are over the salary cap. We thought a lot of guys would get cut because I think there was an assumption if the Eagles were active, they'd be more long-term.
Can I give my take on Torrey Smith real quick?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's really quick. My thing is we can debate up and down how good and bad he is. The Eagles only gave him $500,000 guaranteed. So
tells you something right there.
Yeah, that tells you all you need to know. And it also tells you all you need to know that that's the deal he took. So the rest of the league probably wasn't throwing a ton of money at him either.
And the Joe Douglas connection comes back here, right?
I mean, how many free agents do you think sign and they want a free agency and you go, they're not a lock to make the team?
Not many.
Not many. No,
right.
he probably falls on the – though I'm with you from earlier, Elliot. I'd imagine he's on this team.
He's going to – I mean, yeah, I think he will make the team.
Unless he's Ruben Randall. If he goes out and has a Ruben Randall like preseason – right.
Or what if Nelson Aguilar plays really well?
Exactly.
It feels like they're building in options for themselves, right? That's what I kind of see. Is they go to training camp. We don't even know what's going to happen in the draft yet. But like if Aguilar shows he's that guy they thought he was 3 years ago, then goodbye Torrey Smith, right? If Sayamalu is so good, then who cares about Chance Warmack? It feels like they're building options for themselves. Which,
well, I could see a world where Aguilar's really good and they still keep Torrey Smith. But I see your point that and I mean. So I think Torrey Smith will be okay. I think, he did average 20 yards a catch only 2 years ago, which is not anything just look over. That wasn't like,
And somebody said to me, one of my guys said to me, he just didn't look into it in San Francisco. Maybe coming back east is what he needed. Well, I'll buy that. I mean,
it could be. I loved him when he was in Baltimore.
Well, I will say Howie said on the Eagles website last night, he didn't even gloss. He didn't even pretend like he was going to San Francisco. He said, we think we're getting the player that was in Baltimore. So
if they do, that's a good player.
It is, yeah. No, it's certainly one that changes the dynamic of the offense. All right, so let's look forward here. What happens next? So we thought there'd be more cuts, or at least I did on day one. If they were going to make some moves, I figured, all right, you'd have 3 or 4 guys cut, and they'd have to clear out space. They only cut Connor Barwin, and that was a big one because it was a lot of money. But Barwin's gone. Kelsey's still here. Matthews, obviously, they might have to wait for the injury to figure itself out. But Kendricks is still here. So, Mark, what do you think happens next? Do you think they're going to cut these guys, trade them, and where do you think they're at here?
I wrote Friday morning, I have a story up on NJ.com on who gets cut, traded. How can they get – they're about $6 million over right now as we speak Friday morning, right? They're about $6 million over, and they're going to need another 5 to 6 to sign their draft picks. So they got to come up with about $11 million, between 11 and 12, and you probably want a little bit in the bank as well, too, right? You don't want to be right at the cap. So here are some things they could do. If they can find somebody that wants Chase Daniel, and there was some rumors of teams maybe wanting to trade for him, if they trade Chase Daniel, they save $6 million right off the top. However, they would then need a backup quarterback because as great as we think Carson Wentz is, you can't just have one. So and even a bad backup quarterback is going to cost you $2 to $3 million. Now.
What's Nick Foles going to cost?
$2 to $3 million.
You think so?
Oh God, yeah. If Mike Glennon can get 15, Nick Foles can get 2, right?
I think that's fair, and I'm not even a Foles fan. That seems fair.
I mean, the quarterback money is silly now. It's just silly. Chase Daniel looks like a bargain today.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? So anyway, but I would say if you traded Daniel and you sign Nick Foles and you come away $3-4 million ahead, that's something. Here's something no one's talking about that they could do. They can redo Brandon Graham's salary cap next year is $7.5 million, which isn't crazy, but it's $7.5 million. If they redo his deal, he makes 6.5 this year and 6.5 next year. So he has $13 million coming to him over the next 2 years. They could tear that up, give him like another, or extend him another 3-4 years, turn that $13 million into like a $10 million signing bonus with a base of like 1 or 2, or even give him $12 million, say. So he's still making his 13. That would lower his cap to like between $3 and $4 million. You save $3 or $4 million there. With me so far? All right. Now, here's 5 guys that you could cut, and I don't think you would even miss any of them, and you would save over $5 million, which would cover like the draft picks. Marcus Smith, Ron Brooks, Dorial Green Beckham, Matt Tobin, and Elliot's favorite player of all time, Taylor Hart.
Or not
Come on,
Taylor.
man. He's on offensive line now. This is big
He's Jason Peters' replacement down the line.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, I'm serious. If you cut those five guys, Smith, Brooks, Beckham, Tobin, and Hart, you save over $5 million. That could cover your draft picks. I would do that tomorrow.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't think they're going to cut Marcus Smith, but I don't disagree with you. So if you're 6.5 under now, you save. You're eventually going to cut Ryan Matthews. But
what are you going to save on it? You might have to give him an injury settlement. He's not going away. He's not going away. Okay, guys. He's going to say, "I'm hurt. I'm hurt. I'm hurt. I'm hurt." You're going to have to give him something to walk away.
All right. Well, Michael Kendricks, if you post June 1st, cut him is $5 million.
$5 million. Right.
So you're down to $1 million. I mean, nobody wants to hear it, and I don't think they're going to do it. But if I'm the Eagles, the player I'm trading is Darren Sproles. Saves you $4 million. He's old, so he's not like building for the future here. He's still good. But I think you could get something for him. If it really is his last year in the NFL, don't make him drudge it out in Philadelphia going 7-8. I mean, 7-9. Like, trade him to a contender for a low pick, right? You save $4 million. Use that low pick you're going to get on a draft, Donnell Pumphrey from San Diego State. Like, take a guy that, it makes more sense to what?
Take another Sproles. Take another
Sproles, right? And so that saves you $4 million there. I wouldn't be huge on trading Chase Daniel just because I think he still benefits.
I'm not saying you could do that.
Yeah, that is right. But if I had to rank like my options in terms of my top option would be cutting Kendricks, not because I don't like Kendrick, but just because they're going to do it anyway. So that would be my top option.
And you would post June 1st him?
I would post June 1st him. Yes, that saves me 5.
Now you need 6 more.
Right. But you're including the draft, and also let's note this is if they don't sign anybody else.
Right.
Yeah, so before you guys go on, do you think they're done here? I mean, I'm not talking about. Okay, I'm not talking about someone that is on a $500,000 deal just to come into. I mean, do you think they're done with free agents or no?
No, I bet they signed 2 or 3 more guys that are like guys, like
guys,
defensive players,
guys like Ron Brooks. I think they're going to sign guys like Ron Brooks.
Just to have bodies before they go into the draft?
Like guys that like what?
Who I want to cut.
Right. No, I think the guys that make like $2-3 million a year.
So then they need money. So this is all relevant.
I know they do. I'm just saying I don't think they're done.
Well, then they got to come up with even more than
I said at the top of the show that like we can debate it and figure it out all we want. The salary cap is work. They can work around it. So,
but not really though. They got to cut guys to work around it. You're trading Darren Sproles, who was one of their best offensive players.
Right.
But I think that's Elliot's point. Like, if you want to, you can do it.
Right.
It may bite you later, but you could do it.
But if I say you guys, you don't think they're going to sign? And you don't think they're going to sign any more free agents? I bet they signed somebody today. On Friday. I'm just saying. I think like
when is the date? Everybody keeps asking this, and I should know it, and I don't. When do they have to be under the cap? Because they're over the cap this morning, as we speak Friday morning.
I mean, maybe when training. I mean, because I know they. I think when they start to pay the rookies, maybe
they have time.
We get what I mean. Yeah, when Howie was asked at the combine, Howie was asked in regards to the start of the league year if he had to be cap compliant, and I'm paraphrasing here. I remember him saying something like, "There is no real date when you have to like." He made it sound like this was not a pressing matter. Basically,
but there is a real date. I just don't know what it is.
There is, but my point is, I think it's not like.
I thought it was June 1st. For some reason, June 1st sticks in my head. That's why they have the post June 1st thing. But I could be wrong.
I just think there's enough guys on the roster, and this is probably why they only won 7 games last year. But there's enough guys on the roster that you can cut and not like.
No, I gave you 5. That gets you $5 million.
What? I
gave you 5. That would save you $5 million.
Right? Yeah, you get rid of all of them, then you get rid of Kendricks. That's now you're up to 10. I mean, I'm just saying. I think there's room.
Yeah, there is, but you're getting rid of a lot of guys.
A lot of the guys we're mentioning are very good.
Like my redo Brandon Graham?
I would do that, but I don't. But then again, like to go back to your credit card analogy, if you lower his cap hit lower than 7.5 this year, what's it going to to be in 3 years? 2 years?
You're going to have to re-sign him in 3 anyway, aren't you? I mean, here's what you got to say to yourself.
I would do it. I'm just saying.
Is Brandon Graham a long-term piece to this team?
Yes.
Then do it because you want him. you don't want to risk losing him anyway, right?
But you know what the weird thing is? And maybe the Alshon Jeffery thing really did change everything. But if you're the Eagles, outside of Ryan Matthews, because Ryan Matthews has the injury, so it's a different situation. Which, by the way, that ended up really hurting the Eagles. I know it hurt.
They
Ryan
can't
Matthews.
cut him, right?
Yeah, I mean, to have that happen in a meaningless game in week, I think it was 15 or whatever, like that really.
It was in Baltimore.
But it is so. It is so.
Does he have to show he's healthy before he gets
healthy before you cut him?
He has to pass a physical. You can't cut a guy who's hurt. If he got hurt playing football, if he got hurt in a car accident,
right? That's different.
He got hurt playing. It's like workman's comp. I mean,
right.
He got hurt playing for the Philadelphia Eagles.
So what they can do is they can essentially, but they can buy cap space in a way. Like they can say to him, like,
"Here's $2 million, go away."
Right, and so then they open up $3 million instead of $4 million.
Whatever, right?
Yeah. So I mean that's what'll happen. But I'm just saying it is kind of fitting that this is how Ryan Matthews' time on TV. But I mean, I guess what I was saying though was like, there's enough guys I think they can get rid of to create the space.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's just a matter. Well, so this is what I was saying. So if the Alshon Jeffery thing really did come together in the past 24 hours and it was kind of an impulse buy, like, what maybe the Eagles don't have a plan.
Hey, really?
Like, I mean, what I say is like, we're talking about like, cutting Kelsey and Kendricks and all these guys. Like, if you know that if they know what they're doing and they have a plan in place, why isn't this not done a week ago? I understand holding on to them close to the cut date because maybe you try to trade them, but at this point, I mean, I don't see what the holdup is. Like,
this is a team that traded their starting quarterback 9 days before the season opened.
But isn't there something to being fluid and to allowing yourself to change? Like, you have to have an overall plan. I agree with that, and I can't answer the question if they have one or not. But like, if Alshon falls into your lap and it's a 1-year deal and you don't even think Kelsey and Darwin are good players anymore anyway, then like, why wouldn't you do it?
I don't disagree, but my point is, so as we sit here, or when they agreed to Alshon Jeffery, how concrete is the plan that they had to replace it? To you see what I'm saying? Kind of like if they signed my favorite player, Kenny Stills. If they signed Kenny Stills, you're probably looking at a cap hit in the first year, half of what Alshon Jeffery is. Maybe
if they traded for my favorite player, Brandon Cooks,
right?
$1
Right, exactly. So my point is, like 4 days ago, if you believe Howie, the Eagles did not plan on paying Alshon Jeffery $14 million in 1 year, and they probably didn't plan on paying any player $14 million this year.
That makes sense.
So my point is, what's their plan now? Like, is it the same plan they had before? And how much did Alshon Jeffery kind of change everything?
It feels to me like the plan was to help Carson Wentz, and this became the best option in the moment.
Certainly,
that's my guess.
That's an option.
In the moment is the key words, Joe.
Well, I mean, you can't. But some stuff's out of your control, right? Like if the Saints are asking for a first, you're not giving a first, and Kenny Stills is getting what he gets. What are you going to do?
So this kind of goes back to the beginning of the podcast. Is Alshon Jeffery good enough to throw away your blueprint?
But what was the blueprint to upgrade wide?
Well, I don't think the blueprint was to pay a wide receiver $14 million for 1 year. I'm pretty sure that wasn't in the blueprint.
Yeah,
so is he good? Is he good enough to do that? Plan. Like again, like and to bring the Sixers analogy back in, like we always say, like the Sixers are collecting all these assets, so that when a James Harden becomes available, you can strike and get him, right?
Right.
Like, is Alshon Jeffery your James Harden, your Paul George? Like, is this the guy where you say, all right, screw the cap situation I had before, I'm giving this guy $14 million 1 year? Like, is he that good?
I think that's throwing something againds the wall and hope it works.
Well, you wouldn't give James Harden your deal either, right?
What?
If you're signing James Harden, it's for more than 1 year.
True. Well, right. So let's say the Eagles really didn't 3 days ago, plan on signing Alshon Jeffery $14 million for 1 year. Think of how many things this decision impacts if that is truly the case. They really like Alshon if that's the case, because I guess they don't like him enough to sign him past 1 year. But regardless, like if you really all of a sudden he now has the biggest cap hit on the Eagles like by far. Like, I think he's like 4 or 5 million more than anybody else on the roster.
What's Fletcher?
Fletcher's not that much this year. I think the biggest is – I actually have it right here. So Jason Peters is 11.7. So he's 3.5 or 2.5 more than him or whatever. But then Lane Johnson's 9. Fletcher Cox is 9. Vinny Curry's 9. So, I mean, he's making considerably more than almost every single player on your roster besides Jason Peters. It just feels like it was a spur of the moment decision, and I just wonder how much this changes things because of that spur of the moment decision, both in the cap situation you got to make this year and your plan long term.
Let me throw this out.
Go ahead, Mark.
It's out there. And I just started this as you're saying this. Like maybe this was all on. Maybe it was Jeffrey. Maybe like again, if you believe what's been reported, and I don't believe everything because people make stuff up. I'm not saying the writers. I'm saying sources make things up to make themselves look better in the long run. If the Vikings offered a longer term, more what you would think kind of deal Jeffrey was going to get. Right,
like a Bradford tax, like paying a little extra for having to play with.
Yeah.
And by the way, he turned down money to not play with Sam.
Yeah, he was like, "I'm making no money in Minnesota."
That was good. No, the Vikings offer a longer term. The Colts are in there. We don't know what the Colts were offering. Maybe Jeffrey didn't want. Obviously, he didn't want the Vikings deal for whatever reason.
If there was a Vikings deal, but go ahead.
Maybe he just said. Maybe him and his agent said, we want a 1-year deal. Whoever's going to offer us the most on a one, that's what we're taking. We're taking a 1-year deal. Tell me how much you're going to pay me for 1 year. And the Bears said, well, we'll give you 10. And the Colts said, well, we'll give you 11. And the Eagles said, we'll give you 14. Everybody said, oh, we're done. I don't know. I mean, is that possible? That it was all Jeffrey saying, I only want a 1-year deal. Give me your best 1-year deal.
Maybe.
Could have been, right. And the Eagles were the team willing to do it.
Also, when you first started this, I thought you were talking about Jeffrey Lurie. And maybe he stepped in and told him to do it.
No. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But then again, it's like, is a 1-year deal? How much does a 1-year deal benefit the Eagles?
No, it benefits Jeffrey more than the Eagles.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? So the Eagles basically bent over backwards hard for Jeff.
All right, let's end with this, guys.
Is he good? Yes or no? Okay, let's go around to wrap because we're going to wrap this up. Yes or no? Was the Alshon Jeffery signing? Like, was it worth all this?
It's funny. I was going to say the same thing. We've had the same question in our head. I'll go first. Yes. I think that getting a weapon for Carson Wentz on a 1-year deal, and look, I'd feel different about this if they had to cut 3 or 4 guys that came out of nowhere, right, to clear the cap room. But you guys were writing about these guys that they might now cut, getting cut anyway. I don't think they think they're any good anymore or they're not worth being here anymore. Now, we could debate that, but it just feels like the Eagles feel that way. So I don't think it impacts that much. And it gives them a chance to find a guy that could be here long term. I think the risk is worth what it takes to get him. That's my take.
The fact that you even needed that much to explain your yes shows that it was not an easy yes or no decision, right? I mean, like if we're talking about them doing whatever, like trading for Brandon Cooks or drafting Mike Williams, it's a pretty easy yes. I agree with you. I think. Actually, I don't. Mark, you go. I'm still kind of deciding.
I'm not sure either. I don't know. I mean. Elliot, you and I spoke the night before free agency during the tampering period.
Right.
And that's when you had written a story saying that they were going to be in on A.J. Bowie. And both of us thought they were going to be right down to the wire with Brandon Cooks.
Yeah.
And I told you, man, if they trade for Cooks and sign Bowie, I'm going to write a column saying I take back every bad thing I've ever said, almost every bad thing I've said about Howie Roseman, because I think those two guys then you would have been talking about the future and planning and growing and two young good players that could really change the course of your.
And Jeffrey's not old. Let's just put that out.
27, right?
But he's been hurt.
But the 1-year deal complicates things. So I agree.
And like Mark said earlier, he's a guy that's had a PED complication. That might be my biggest.
That's what I don't.
That's the one that I fear the most because I don't really know how great he is.
I just don't. Again, and that's why I can't love Jeffrey because I'm so anti-PED. You don't know. I mean, that's my one thing. I mean, other guys are anti-wife beater, anti-punching your girlfriend, anti-marijuana and smoking. All that bothers me. Don't get me wrong, but I could.
I was going to say you might want to clarify that. Go ahead, though.
But again, I would sign a guy that was suspended for smoking weed, thinking, all right, tell him stop smoking weed. Then a guy that tested because I know the weed didn't make him. If he was smoking weed and still catching 80 passes, he's pretty good. You know, that didn't make him better. PEDs make you better. They're called performance enhancing drugs. They enhance your performance. So maybe he's not that good without him. I don't know that. So that bothered me a little bit about Jeffrey. Because I liked him a lot till last year. I liked him. I thought much more of him until he got suspended last year.
All right. So yes or no?
No.
So you don't like the signing?
No, I don't hate it, but no, I would have rather had Cooks or Pryor. Or a corner.
Man, yeah, I really can't decide. I kind of think I'm like 51% yes, 49% no. Just because, yes, we've discussed the negatives a lot. There are positives too. He's a good receiver. He's going to help Carson Wentz, all those things. If he's really good, you pay him next offseason, but then you're paying a really good player. You get him in the building. But I'm not like, and again, they're fans, so I understand why they'd be very excited. But I'm not like all these people that are like super enthusiastic about it. I don't see that. And let me ask you guys one more thing before we wrap up. Were there character issues with Alshon Jeffery in Chicago? Because I heard people on the radio discussing, like, saying he's not a good guy. Was that a narrative with him in Chicago, or is that not?
Well, all those Bears, that 1 year, they all kind of, like, remember Cutler was fighting with Brandon Mark they were a good team. They were a winning team that year when Cutler had a good year, and they had Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffery. Weren't they always, all of them fighting Cutler was a hard guy to get along with, from what I'm told, right? I mean, he brought a lot of it upon himself.
Right.
But so there's a lot of fighting in the Bears.
I'm just saying that might be one more thing to consider, bringing a guy in that maybe isn't the best guy and also on a 1-year deal. I thought
about it as much as PEDs.
So actually, you know what? In retrospect, if I were the Eagles, I wouldn't have given him a 1-year $14 million deal. I would not have.
So you flipped to 51-49 the other way?
Yeah, I flipped. Because if you told me you signed him to a long-term deal, then I might be on the 51-49. But 1-year deal, $14 million of cap space, you handcuff yourself for the draft. I mean,
but long-term deal is more risky, no? Because he'll be a PED guy or a character guy. Like, at least you could feel it out this way.
You can protect yourself. Maybe I'm back to 51-49.
All right, next time we talk, maybe we'll have even stronger feelings on Alshon. All right, we'll be back soon to do more of this. Obviously, we'll start getting ready and leading up to the draft, and if the Eagles do anything else. But the Eagles were, as always, active when free agency started. Alshon Jeffery, Torrey Smith, Chance Warmack, all now Philadelphia Eagles. Connor Barwin no longer an Eagle.
Let's talk about that for 1 second.
Connor?
Am I the only person that thinks they're going to miss him?
You're one of the only.
I think you are the only person that thinks. I think they're going to miss the guy. He was a good guy. He was a really good Eagle. I just don't think he fit this scheme, right? Like he was not that.
But I just think something about character and leadership. I know that they're like, I'm old, and maybe I think that's more important than it is. But he had a presence in that locker room that's going to be missing.
And you're replacing it with Alshon.
Alshon's got to play defense. Fenton. I think they'll miss that part of the mark. I do. He was a good Eagle. He was a good signing a few years ago. He really worked out.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I understand why they did it. I mean, they needed to get money from somewhere. But I just think they're going to miss him more than people. Everybody's like, "Oh, good, get rid of him." I think they're going to miss him. Like somebody else can assume that role. I don't know who. Like Fletcher Cox would be the obvious one, but that's just not in his makeup. It's not what he does. You know?
Right, and when Connor Barwin's winning a Super Bowl for the Patriots next year, we'll look back to this podcast.
Bro.
All right, Elliot, thanks for doing this.
Yep, no problem. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Joe.
And thanks to all of you for listening to episode 61 of the No Huddle Show. We'll be back soon as we start getting ready for the rest of the offseason and the NFL draft. The Eagles with a big splash on day one of free agency. Thanks for listening on NJ.com.